I'll just go in order that I see people here, and I'll just start. I'm Seth Hufford again. I'm one member of the BMW Responsible Leaders Network. As Peter mentioned, that's how we were connected. And I'm a consultant that does work with organizations around leadership and organizational development. I work cross-sector and also focus on equity and inclusion within organizations, and really happy that Peter invited me to be part of this. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you all. And I'm just going to go, as I said, across here, who I see in my gallery view. So the next person I see is John. So if you could just say quick hello and where you're based.
Hi, yeah, my name is John Poor. I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm also quite grateful to Peter for having invited me. My focus is a lot of international trade and trying to make vertical integration apply to smallhold farmers. Thanks.
Okay, and then Elaine, if I'm pronouncing that right, if you could just introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, Alain Chetrit here. I'm also in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm in Virginia. A friend of Peter's, a YPO member, and involved in several businesses, including fund management, several boards. I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I've been involved in several businesses, including in the food distribution. So happy to be on the call.
Great, thank you. Adele?
I am Adel Msiri. I am a serial entrepreneur as well. And I have a PhD in machine learning, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. I actively publish in them. I also consult with companies around those topics. And I'm one of the mentors here. So also I'm very thankful for Peter to add me here.
Great, thank you. And Soraya?
Hi, I'm Soraya Hasni. I'm based in Tunisia, in Sousse currently, and I'm working in the olive oil supply chain.
Great, thank you. David?
Hi, my name is David Martinez Moreno. I am based in Switzerland, and I do visual media in augmented reality. I'm a developer on that, and I was invited here by Peter also. I will be giving tomorrow, please all of you join, a talk about the supply chain and how we can see it through art and through history. And I am an art history and technology developer for innovation.
Great, thank you. Ebony?
Hi, hello, my name is Ebony. I am a recent graduate of SAIS's International Relations Master's Program, as well as Wharton's MBA program. I'm interested in international trade and finding for-profit solutions to the challenges within the agriculture and food supply chain.
Great, thank you. Helen? Looks like we just lost Helen. So I'm gonna go to Christine.
Hi, my name's Christine, and I'm based in Silicon Valley. I've been an IP attorney for almost 2 decades, and my focus has been on computer technology. I work with clients of all different sizes. I've built patent and IP portfolios for startups, spin-outs, in big companies. And one of my favorite parts of the job is helping the innovators develop and flesh out their ideas.
Great, thank you. Is it Sindhu?
Hi, sorry. My name is Sindhu. I am located in Los Angeles, and I've been working in financial consulting for resource utilities. And I am really interested in altering the supply chain of agriculture and solutions for sustainable ag.
Great, thank you. And Robert?
Hello, I'm Bob Castro. I'm currently based in the GCC region of the Middle East, but moving back to the North Africa, Eastern Med region as soon as COVID will allow. My wife's diplomatic assignment to put us there. She's a former colleague of Peter's. We've gotten to know each other through the years, and I myself am in private industry now, about half my career, but a former State Department official and USAID senior advisor. So in addition to being a mentor and moderator for sessions, I think Peter would like me to focus as much as I can on connecting the dots on public-private partnerships and sort of how to navigate this new world of partnering for solutions.
Great. What an impressive group from all parts of the world. That's great to have you all today. We're going to just do a little interactive session about teams and things that I've learned over the years and working with teams in all kind of shapes and sizes, ones that have come together in this type of format, like a hackathon, they're working together for the first time, and ones that have been well established within organizations. And I think that what I've found is that there's some, just some basic ideas. You might be able to see them behind me here around purpose, agreements, and accountability that can help you function more effectively, especially when you're kind of thrown together and come up with some ideas in a short period of time. So I'm going to share some slides and, again, kind of keep this interactive and light since it is a Saturday. So let me just get that going here. All right. There we go. Everyone see that okay?
Perfect.
Peter, we good?
Yes, we are.
Good. All right. So I think the important thing to start with is just what is a team, right? Any thoughts? Either you can populate the chat or weigh in. What is a team? How would you define it?
A group of people working towards a common goal.
Okay, working towards a common goal. Anything to add to that from anyone else?
A group of people supporting each other to get to a common goal.
Okay, supporting each other. Anyone else want to weigh in? Okay, well, here's the definition that I use, and it like many things is learn from reading, right? So Patrick Lencioni has done a lot of writing on teams and taken his definition and adopted it. And I think there are a couple pieces that you hit, there's common goals, right? And that you're supporting each other, which is maybe you're sharing accountability for those goals. I think two other pieces that are essential and the hardest, or the second one is the hardest piece, right? That really a team is no more than a dozen. And as we know, that dozen is a number that we use and has been throughout history, right? If you look at sports teams, if you look at other examples, right, usually is around a dozen people. And I think I have seen a tipping point with that number, that if it gets larger than that, things become a little bit more unwieldy. So that's an important point that sometimes within our organizations, we say we have a team of 40 people. Well, really, that's a larger grouping, but then you have sub-teams within that, right? But the last one, point 3 here, I think is the hardest thing. You've got to put the needs of the team ahead of your personal interests. And that's not always easy, right? So especially if you're coming together like this in a hackathon and you have specific ideas of what you want to get through, you've got to really take a step back and listen to everyone else and see how the needs align, right? Put the team needs ahead of your own personal needs. So just wanted to level set with what is a team so that you get a sense of that. Right, and as I said, there are these 4 practices that I usually share with teams. Purpose, agreements, accountability are the 3 that we're going to have time to do today. The one around feedback is really, something that's more ingrained. I would hope that throughout this process, throughout this week, that you might be working with others, that there's an opportunity for feedback and talking about how your interaction goes. but that would take a whole nother set of learning. So I'm going to focus on these first three practices. And so purpose is really answering the question, why does a team exist, right? And any thoughts or experiences that you've had where you had a clear purpose, you were on a team with a clear purpose? Anyone weigh in on that question? Share an example of where you've been on a team with a clear purpose.
Working on a political campaign?
Mm-hmm.
Or
What?
sports team?
So certainly there's a clear purpose with the political campaign around getting the person elected, right? Winning the game. So, that type of clarity is really helpful, right? It gives meaning to the work. It provides that direction and focus that the team needs. And it ensures buy-in, right? Everyone's kind of, as was stated earlier, working towards the same goal. And so I found even if you're on a team within an organization that you don't really have a choice for, I mean, here you're coming together, you have a choice, but it's important to define for yourself as a team, what is our purpose, right? And it's not necessarily as straightforward as winning the game or electing the candidate. It's really just something, a statement, a sentence, if you will, that can serve as the foundation for your work, right? That it's almost like a rallying cry, as we say, right? Something that is almost a slogan. And when you're kind of in the thick of things, you can come back and say, yes, I know why we're working together. This phrase, this sentence really gives us something to come together and have that clarity around. So my suggestion, as you move forward and form your teams in this hackathon, is that you take a little bit of time and create a team purpose, right? And there's a pretty straightforward way of going about that. And that's just having everyone weigh in with, well, why is this important to you, right? And obviously we're limited now to doing things virtually, but you can use a lot of those tools to just capture, like, well, what words or phrases are important to each person? Like, why is this important to you? And then see where there's commonality in those themes and cluster them together. And then, from those, you can create a set of phrases and then put them together in a sentence. And so just that process of creating a purpose, gets the buy-in, because it brings in everyone's voice. And there's a lot of great research, I don't know if you're familiar with, that Google did about, what makes for effective teams. And one of the pieces is really making sure there's equal time, not necessarily equal time, but there's time that everyone has their voice heard. And this sets that tone from the beginning. If you sit down, you're coming together, and you take the time up front to hear from everyone about why this is important, that builds the foundation and the trust that you need to work together. So it's a pretty straightforward process, but again, taking that time and not going right into what you're trying to solve, right? Taking the time to set up that framework and that foundation for working together effectively is really important. So just getting that buy-in, getting that process. What I'd like to do is just have you spend a couple minutes in a small group. We're going to use the breakout room feature, and just, for a couple minutes, you'll have a couple people in your breakout. I want you to just talk about a powerful team experience that you've had in your career, or in, I know it sounded like some of you are just coming out of graduate studies. Maybe that there's a powerful experience you had in those studies. What was that team experience, and what made it powerful for you? So I'm gonna send you into some breakout rooms here, and people will have 3 or 4 participants in their breakout room, and spend about 5 minutes, so be short and sweet with your example, but just share that, and then we'll come back into the main session. All right, so I'm going to send you to breakout rooms, and we'll come back in about 5 minutes.
Hey, Ebony,
Hi.
hey, Roman, how are you both?
Hi, doing good. How are you?
Good, good.
I'm fine, thank you.
We have a line left too. Fantastic. All right. So I guess to share some experience where it was really intense and really focused on something and really felt like that team all working together on a goal. I would say
Sir.
hey, how are you? It was another room and I was midway through a sentence and they jumped over here. So hello.
Hey, I was just telling Soraya that you guys put us here because we are both originally from the Middle East.
Well, it's the region I live in now anyway, and chose to live there a second time. So, or third time in the region, second time in Tunisia, rather. But
You are in the capital, Tunis?
normally I'm in Tunis. Right now I'm in Germany and waiting for airplanes to start flying again. Soraya's heard this story already from me, but
So Soraya, what's your team experience like? What do you work?
Yeah, I was thinking about it. As co-working in a team, I can remember like one of the best experience I had was when I was a college student and I worked at IBM. And for me, it was a high achieving environment, which is what drives me when there's like a very like strong purpose and something that's not easy to achieve. And everyone knew what they had to do. Everyone knew their role. They respected each other and was aligned with the high achieving environment. And whenever there was like a stressful time, everyone would just align. And I really, really enjoyed that team work when I was in this environment. And it's quite different in academia. Which is where my career went for a little bit before going back to business, but academia is a little different.
well, Adele can speak on both of those topics too. But I would say for me, I would think of the experience that jumped into my mind first was when I was working for the State Department. Anytime there was a Secretary of State visit or any other high-level political visitor, it was the whole embassy would just mobilize to make everything ready, to make sure that somebody's waiting at the door, somebody's got the water bottle, somebody's got the snack, every little tiny detail, who's sitting where, who's going to shake hands at what moment exactly, that everything had to be choreographed exactly. And so, wait, only 1 minute. So that was an experience really being very focused and a team pulling together because everybody had to coordinate perfectly to make it go correctly. Adele?
Yeah, so I kind of bridge both the academic and the industry experience, and I can see the differences in both. One thing that I like about academia is that there is always a lot of time to kind of understand and focus, and there were always a lot of unwilling volunteers that get assigned to your team, kind of thing. Just because the professor wanted to do something and they get people together. So that kind of like constituted both a challenge and also provided help from other people around those. While the industry, it's more kind of like around fast-paced, goal-oriented, and there's always like a lot of things that you have to accomplish and finish and get done there, which can really result into a stressed environment much faster than academia.
I think with the teams, one of the issues is if you have somebody who's not pulling their weight on the team or somebody who's not fully contributing, the frustration of that, do you manage to train that person or do you and get them to inspire them to work harder, or do you end up just being like, oh, that's too much effort and just doing it yourself? Which isn't the best way to go, but sometimes might happen.
Yeah, that may happen. I just realized as we speak that I prefer high stress environment for like working with teams and maybe like a slower pace, academic pace by myself. But when I'm in a team, the other example I was going to mention was when I was working in Palestine, which was also a high stressful environment. So they both matched like what drives me the most.
And to your point, Peter, I learned a lot in industry that if you have someone that's not pulling their weight, you have to kind of like meet with them and kind of change their behavior. Otherwise, it will affect your entire.
All right, we've got everyone back.
We have one new guest as well. Michael just joined the call as well.
Okay, welcome, Michael. So we just finished some breakout rooms, Michael, where people were sharing a powerful team experience that they've had. So I'd love to hear maybe you remember what group you were in with what people. Any themes that you heard from that discussion? What stood out? What maybe made for those powerful group experiences?
Sorry, I just joined, so I guess you're talking about, I mean, group experiences through this hackathon so far, or just in general?
No, I wanted to hear from the groups. Thanks for clarifying, Michael. I just wanted to hear, we had people in breakout groups. So I'm just trying to hear from each group, maybe if there were some themes in the stories that you shared in those breakout groups. So any themes that you heard about powerful experiences? John, you want to weigh in?
Absolutely. So our team came to a pretty strong consensus that it's very impactful and meaningful to be able to put yourself or put the team before yourself and experience what it is to be one part of an organism that's going to do best when it works together and forgets about the self-interest aspect.
Mm-hmm. More easily said than done, right?
Far more easily said than done. But when it is done right, it's an incredible feeling.
Right. How about some observations? Thanks, John. Observations, themes from other groups?
So in my group, we had two observations. One is the contrast of academic teams versus industry teams. One is a little bit more relaxed. The other one is usually high stress and high paced.
Mm-hmm.
And the second note is around just what John said, in the sense of in a team situation, you have to also have responsibility. So you have to pull your weight, otherwise you have to leave the team.
Right. I mean, certainly, and we'll touch on that in the accountability piece and some of the agreement piece that I'm going to cover. That making sure that people understand what their responsibilities are is really important, and that yes, different teams that you're on, some are more high stakes, some are lower stakes, and the opportunity to kind of play around with how you're showing up in those teams, depending on the level of stakes, can be a little fun experiment if you're willing to do that. So if we've heard from two people, that means there's one group we haven't heard from. So if someone from that group could weigh in, that would be great.
I'll weigh in. I didn't get a chance to share my thoughts in our group where we just ran out of time. So what I'll add is that my experience is that running a board of 15 or 17 board members and having to be that to make people accountable and also get some value out of the teams. So breaking the board into smaller groups and making people accountable within those smaller groups, and then having them interact in the way you're doing it right now, Seth, to get value out of the power of that group. So I felt that breaking down the team to give each group a responsibility within the team was powerful to me.
Mm-hmm. And I think that in addition to having that type of clarity, one thing we sometimes forget is, you just all have shared some powerful experiences about what worked in teams. Don't forget to bring that experience into, this type of setting or other types of settings. rely on that great experience, the great experiences you have had, and bring those to bear in other situations, right? So sometimes we just jump in and forget about all the great experiences we've had and don't apply those. So I encourage you to take forward these great experiences into the work you'll be doing in this hackathon. So a couple other pieces that I wanted to share with you. That purpose and kind of bringing in your prior experience is really important, right? The second piece that we're covering here is really about coming to some agreements. And this is where, once you're clear on why you're working together, this is about how you work together. And I'll be sharing a template with that Peter can distribute after this that you can use, obviously for this experience, but then for any team experience that you have. Really creating some clear rules about how you're going to work with one another. And those kind of fall into these four different areas, right? First is participation. Especially in this type of setting, what do you expect for people in terms of how they're participating? Does everyone have to be on every kind of call that you're doing, or can you kind of come and go, right? So if it's not clear about how people are participating, that can cause a lot of tension, right? Because, well, I didn't realize I needed to show up for this, but in someone's mind, they did. And so being explicit about that, and this doesn't take too much energy, right? But just to be clear about what are we expecting around participation from each of our team members. The second, obviously, communication is huge. How are you going to communicate together, especially when you're working virtually, as we all are forced to now. But even when we're in person, how are we going to communicate when you're working in teams that are working across cultures, working across language barriers, being clear about the primary modes of communication, making sure there's common understanding across language barriers and cultural differences is vitally important. Third is dealing with conflict. Again, from a cultural perspective, different cultures deal with conflict in different ways. And so, especially working in international teams, you need to be clear about what's your personal preference for conflict and dealing with conflict, and then making that apparent in the team so that you have some sense of, well, when there's a conflict, and again, conflict is the grist, is the vehicle to really make things happen, right? So conflict is inevitable because we're not working solo. Conflict is a good thing, but let's just be clear about how we deal with that conflict. And then the fourth one is, how are you going to make decisions? Probably in this setting, you want to come to consensus on a lot of things, but realizing that there are different ways of making decisions, consensus making. You can have a vote, right? Or you can have one person who's in charge of making certain decisions, but just some clarity around decision making is helpful. And so, again, there's a template that I'll share that has some prompting questions for each of these that, is an easy way to kind of set up some of these agreements for working together. And, when you're doing that, one of the important things is, as I said, really being conscious of the diversity that you have in your group, whether it's people from different backgrounds, different cultures, speaking different languages, gender, race, being very cognizant of how those different identities play into these rules, right? And then this is my bad attempt at humor, but you see the dinner roles there, but I'm actually talking about the roles, ROLES, right? That, as someone said earlier, like being clear about what role does everyone play in these. So that's my corny American joke for the day. So, this is a way of just, again, from the beginning, having a shared set of understanding about how you're engaging with one another. And so, again, a way to do this is just to go through these questions that I'll share with you in the template, bring in that past experience that you've had about what's worked well, and then just develop some short sentences about how you want to work together in this capacity, right? And you can capture those so that there's a, create a Google Doc, what have you, that has those agreements on them. So that's really about agreements. So we've covered purpose, we've covered agreements. Any quick thoughts or reactions before I go into our last piece to close us out around accountability? Any thoughts about the team agreements? Have you done these types of team agreements in prior engagements?
Yeah, so for me, kind of like in terms of, I've been involved in software development a lot. So, and we use agile method in doing those. And one of the core pieces there is that when the objectives of the cards are set by business, that we would have a session for grooming so that everybody will understand what needs to get done. And also a session for what we call sprint planning to understand how we're going to go through those. So that kind of like aligns exactly with what you are outlining here, is figuring out what needs to get done and also having an agreement on how we're going to do it, who's responsible for it, and when we're going to achieve all of those.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And setting that up front, I would assume, yes, makes the workflow much better.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Other comments, thoughts about creating agreements? Have you done this in the past?
It's been, for teams that I've worked with in the past, one of the most important things for creating any of the agreements has been transparency and the strengths and weaknesses that each person brings to the table. So having a team where somebody is very comfortable saying, I'm not necessarily the best at, pivot tables, but I am really good at this, allowing you to exploit each other's strengths and weaknesses, save a lot of time, and allow people to feel comfortable communicating when they don't want to take a part of the project on.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that in, John. I mean, one of the, understanding people's strengths and weaknesses and what they prefer to do is also a big helpful piece of this. And it can come out in whether you're talking about what's important to people and the purpose of the team purpose or these agreements, you can kind of get a sense of where people's interests lie, where their strengths lie. But, being explicit about that is really helpful too. And oftentimes in the leadership programs I've run, I've encouraged people to step out of their zones of comfort, right? So if you're the person in a team who always likes to organize people and, set out like, well, here's the tasks, and give that up, especially these types of experiences like a hackathon where there are lower risks, lower stakes. This is an opportunity to say, you know what? I want to grow a little bit. I know I like to organize everyone. I'm going to let someone else do that. And I'm going to do something that maybe I'm a little less comfortable with so I can grow and not just go to what I'm comfortable with. So yeah, you can always use these types of experiences as a way to grow how you operate in a team. Thanks for those comments. Let's hit the last piece here about accountability. Right, and this has already emerged in our discussion, but thinking about accountability, it gives people clear roles, it gives people clear responsibilities, and it empowers people. It creates that sense of ownership, and it ensures that we actually make progress in what we're trying to accomplish. Right. In the evolution of these practices, for me, this is one that initially I didn't have in, but I found, over the years that, of course, accountability is so important, and a lot of unclarity, especially when you're working in these types of environment where there's no clear, lines of authority, that things get dropped, right? So one of the things, and again, this will be on the template that I found really helpful, is this accountability grid, especially when you're working in these teams where no one has direct authority, that you really identify these three roles. Who is the one person? And again, a lot of times it's like, well, we're going to have two people accountable for this work. Well, it's really important to just assign one person who is accountable for that piece of work, right? Because if it's two people, they can be looking at one another and say, I thought you were going to do that. I thought you were going to do that. So setting up who's the one person who's accountable for this, making sure this work is complete, is really important. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually doing the work, but that they are accountable. So that's what where the responsible comes in, right? That those who are doing the work can be different, or could be, I could be accountable and responsible, right? And then there are people we need to consult whose input we need to do this work, right? So that setting up this set of accountability for, a hackathon like this will make sure that it's clear who's doing what and who we go to for what pieces of it. So just a simple grid that you can fill out to ensure accountability. So again, we've talked about these, 3 different pieces for working in a team: the purpose, the agreements, the accountability. One final thought, and then I'd love to get some final thoughts from you all. We can kind of go around. When we're working together, right? That these practices are not a one-time thing, right? As you work together, whether it's for a week like this or you're working together for a long period of time, this has got to be built into how you work. It can't just be focused on the output. It's got to be focused on the people and the relationships, right? So as you meet, building time in for evolving these practices. And then, it's just as when you're working in a team, we said you need to put the importance of the team above your own personal interests. In this case too, this is about putting first the relationships that you're building rather than the product or project that you're working on, right? So elevating the relationships and the connections that you're making as the number one will help with this, right? So it's really about putting the people before the project. So that's some quick thoughts on working effectively in teams. Any final comments, thoughts that you want to weigh in on?
So I'll start. I think just contrasting my academic and my industry kind of like backgrounds. So for those 3 are really good for the academic piece, where you know the purpose and you are in agreement and you do the accountability in a team, like we're writing a paper or something like that, because we really are there and we're going to continue to work with each other. In an industry aspect, sometimes we want to add also the incentive or motivation, kind of like what we here say, what's in it for me? Because kind of like that helps kind of like ground you in, like, I'm here, either I'm doing a job or I'm trying to connect with people or I'm trying to get this out, and like your internal motivation to be here for doing that. So I don't know how to work it into those 3.
I would say that there could be 2 pieces of that. I appreciate you bringing that up. That going back to the purpose, you could start with, well, what's important to me individually, and then let's, as I said, let's come up with something that is important collectively. But even having people start with, well, what's most important to you, right? And hearing that from everyone, and then trying to create a team purpose out of that, right? That you can get at what's most important to you. What do you value? I mean, on the template, you'll see one of the things you could kind of insert into here is, what do you value most? And then by people stating, well, what do you value? Well, it's important to me to just get this work done, right? Or it's important to me to have an incentive to get this done, right? Kind of surfacing some of those values can be a way of getting at that.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions, thoughts?
This has been great, Seth. Thank you very much. My pleasure.
My pleasure. And we will certainly share the template with you. I'll get that to Peter. And, I look forward to connecting with you throughout the week. As Peter mentioned, we'll do some meditation later in the week, and then come back for some reflections.
There's one thing that I wanted to add, just inspired by what Peter just said to you, is like he said, thank you. And he said, my pleasure. So, and we, like in an industry, we often forget about that because we're running. You finish this, you get this, all of this stuff, and nobody says thank you. and it makes a lot of impact on, like, even if it is your job and you have to do it because you're getting paid for this one. But when you say thank you, it makes positive reinforcement in there versus like negative, I'll fire you if you don't do it.
Michael, you had something to add?
No, I just totally agree. And then, no, this is very, very helpful, and especially for a group that's coming together very, very suddenly, that it's a group of people who don't know each other, need to have, you know, a frame and, you know, basic ground rules before going. Otherwise, it's just probably too many variables spelling a, you know, formula for disaster. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And again, that last piece that you mentioned, I mean, the thank you comes into the feedback, right? That's the fourth piece here that we didn't have time to go into today, but certainly just that acknowledgement from Peter is really appreciated. So yeah, thank you all, and look forward to talking with you over the week.
Excellent. Until the next meeting.
Bye.
Thank you.